Good evening, everybody. My name is E.R. Anderson. I'm the executive director of Charis Circle. Charis Circle is the nonprofit programming arm of Charis Books, and Charis Books is the South's oldest independent feminist bookstore. We are delighted to be here with all of you tonight from around the country, around the world. We have folks watching internationally and from across the United States. And we have a superstar lineup. Somebody compared it to the WWE, and I don't know that I'm going to do it justice in that way, but I love the idea of throwing it down in celebration of this book, Girlhood by Melissa Febos. This book is already changing people's lives. People are already talking about it so much in the press today and online today, talking about how meaningful it has been, and I know how meaningful it's been to me. So I'm really honored to be here celebrating with you on Pub Day, Melissa. Thank you so much for doing this with us. Thank you for, getting together a cavalcade of incredible writers to celebrate with you. We often think that you can sort of judge a community by who shows up to celebrate your work, and you are such a champion for other people's work, and it shows in all the folks who have joined you tonight to celebrate your work. So congratulations. Yeah, we're thrilled to get started. So do you want to tell folks a little bit about this book and how tonight's going to go?
Sure, I do. Thank you, first of all, so much for having me and all my friends and my partner and my book. And just, to you especially, but also Dartrisha and all of the staff at the bookstore. This is just like, I don't know, my dream place to launch this book. It really feels like a kind of home. And I'm glad that we can all be together in this virtual format. My own girlhood was the starting point for this book. And as I tried to put words to those aspects of my own experience that once felt impossible to name, that process eventually sort of turned outward and bloomed into these conversations that I had first with my friends and partner and family, and then it expanded to other people. And I got to hear about their experiences and relationships to the idea of girlhood. And in many ways, this book is an argument against the typical associations that the word girlhood brings to mind. I struggled at first with the title, and it feels so dear to me now because I really wanted to sort of hollow it out and refill it with truer associations. All of the horrible, ecstatic, erotic, sublime, secretive, scary, other S words, parts of growing up and identifying or being identified as female. And so it just made perfect sense to me to launch this book as a celebration of voices, of writers whose work challenges notions of girlhood, redefines it, rejects it, expands it, explodes it. And, also I just love all of these writers, most of whom have new books out or imminently out. So definitely everyone here buy all of their books. Most of all, I just wanted to see their faces and hear their voices and share today with them. So we're all going to read, everyone's going to read for about 5 minutes or less in alphabetical order, and then I'll close out the evening. And thank you so much for coming. It really means everything to me.
Yeah. So folks who are watching at home, we love when you engage in the chat. Please feel free to clap back, tell us what you like, shout out where you're watching from. We want this to feel like some perfect combo of an in-person reading and your living room. But we're all comfortable and in our sweatpants. So it's the best of all possible worlds. We're thrilled you're here. So we're going to start it off with Jami Attenberg. So we're going to say goodbye to Melissa for a little bit, and then she's going to pop back up in a little while. Bye, Melissa. And now I'm going to bring up Jami. One moment. Jami is the author of several books. Most recently, All This Can Be Yours. So 1 second while we bring Jami up.
Hi.
Hi, Jami.
How you doing? Oh, it's just going to be me. Okay. Congratulations to Melissa. The book is really wonderful. I read it, I remember, just at the very beginning of the pandemic last year. And if you all haven't got it yet, hopefully you will buy it after this event. It's a really special book. I don't even want to say too much about it. I can't wait to hear Melissa read from it, though. I'm just going to read from my memoir, which is going to come out next year. I actually only have a little bit in the book about my childhood, but it's right at the very beginning, so it doesn't need any explanation. I am the daughter of a motherless mother. That sounds more dramatic than it actually is, though I suppose it had a gothic romantic quality to me when I was a child. It was sad that my mother's mother had died so young, but it was also a mystery, and mysteries were interesting. I knew so little about the woman who would have been my grandmother. She passed away when my mother was 11 and had been sick for 5 years before her death. So my mother had only known her in a certain way and only up to a certain point. There was a palpable absence that existed in our lives, the not knowing of this person, having so few stories to pass around fondly. She was mentioned, she was discussed on occasion, certainly, but mainly the faint idea of her existed in the background. Even when sadness is not stated, of course, it can be deeply felt. My mother was not an outwardly sad person. To this day, she is cheerful, energetic, and congenial. She has a crisp sense of humor, big brown eyes, a wry smile. She likes to play team sports. Even in retirement, you have to drag her off the pickleball court. People like her. I get asked all the time how I can write about such fucked up families. My mother is so obviously a nice person. And yet, I always had an awareness of tragedy and loss in my youth, even though I had lost nothing myself. An attraction to that which was absent, a sketch, an outline never fully formed, but still it existed as an idea, filling in the imaginary blanks with information I did not have, but found I could invent quite easily, a thing we do as writers if we just give ourselves permission. But also there was something about just feeling the sense of the void. It wasn't just one less Nana to tell me they loved me, although wouldn't that have been pleasant to hear? The tragedy and loss had nothing to do with me. It was explicitly the absence of her in my mother's life, a woman missed, and with that the thing she never had to teach. She never had a chance to learn from her mother. Most of those things revolved around being a girl. I'm speaking of the traditional old-fashioned sense of girlhood and femininity, one that still thrived in the 1950s and 60s and even still through the 80s when I was growing up. What it means to be a girl now is different, more flexible, full of new possibilities, and to whom that girlhood is available has changed as well. But I'm thinking of a time when girls were supposed to wear makeup and dresses, eventually get married and have babies, cook, clean, that sort of thing. It seemed like eons ago. I know all these expectations still exist in our culture, but there's room for more now, much more than this laundry list of expected feminine characteristics. My mother never learned these things, though, not in a way a mother hands them down to her daughter, and thus I never learned about them either as a child. I was a tomboy until I wasn't, but there was no bridge to the other side. However, there was capitalism. When I was 12 years old, my mother took me to the mall to find out about makeup. Madonna's first album had just come out and everyone wanted to look like her, especially apparently the young woman at the makeup counter. Her hair fell in neat waves against her head, curled certainly that morning patiently in the mirror. She was patient with my face too, disciplined, focused on a vision, an elaborate geometric display in my eyes of hot pink and lavender triangles, heavy mascara and eyeliner. I experienced a rivet of panic with each new layer. It was a look for a much older girl, and also there was no way I could have recreated it on my own. I was never any good at coloring between the lines, let alone eyelids. I can't do this, I thought. I can't be this. During the car ride home from the mall, I looked at myself in the passenger side mirror, then burst into tears. I look like a prostitute, I said, having never met or seen a prostitute or having any understanding of their experience. Well, you don't have to wear it again, my mother said in a tone that suggested makeup was unnecessary anyway. What was makeup anyway? A way to alter the perception when my face was already young and clean and clear and healthy. Lipstick did this, mascara did that. It was a concoction, a recipe. At the time, it felt false to me. Makeup seemed an obligation, a task to apply it. It was what I was supposed to do to present as normal, whatever normal meant, whatever being a girl meant, whatever it all means. The rules had been constructed long before I was born, and I did not know yet I was allowed to break them or redefine them or ignore them entirely if I chose. After all, I went to the mall to learn how to be a girl. And at that age, I wasn't even sure what I liked about myself, what I wanted to show off or accentuate, if that was a thing I even wanted to do at all. Couldn't we just talk instead? I loved ideas. Couldn't I just daydream all day? But no, it was time to look differently, feel differently, grow up into the next version of yourself. Makeup made me realize quite suddenly there was a clock ticking that I hadn't even been aware of before then. The only kind of makeup I ever really loved is lipstick. I love all the bright colors, wild, hysterical pinks that turn a dull outfit up, poke a hole in a gray day, or bright, sexy, sultry reds that stain my lips for hours, marked in some way. I like the way lipstick can interact with my eyes, which I feel most of the time are happier on their own, undressed. I like thinking about my mouth after many years of not thinking about it at all. A thing I like on my face, I can confirm it. My mouth, I will decorate that. It took me many years to arrive at that place, to find a thing I wanted to paint. I'll stop there.
Whew, thank you, Jami. We are gonna invite folks to pay attention. And what is the title of your forthcoming book?
It's I Came All This Way to Meet You, Writing Myself Home. It comes out in January of next year.
All right, everybody keep an eye out. Pre-order that book. We will be promoting it at Charis for sure. So thank you so much, Jami.
Thanks. Congratulations, Melissa.
And the next person we're going to bring up is Melissa Broder. Melissa's newest book is Milk Fed, which came out in February. And we're just waiting on Melissa to pop up here. All right. Welcome, Melissa. You are all set. Thank you.
Oh, I'm live. Hello. Melissa Febos. What can we say? Salt of the earth human being, incredible writer, generous spirit, girlhood rules, Forsyth illustrations rule. I don't remember what I said in my blurb, but it was true, which isn't always true. And that's the story. So get her book. Here we are reading about girlhood. I'm going to read just like 3 pages from a book of mine that just came out called Milk Fed. It has a boob on the cover. So, all right. So this is a woman on a communication detox from her consuming mother, finds herself fantasizing about a MILF at her office, really a G-MILF, but Anna was the only maternal figure I had left. I wanted to please her more than ever. I wanted her to soak me in praise. I also recognized that I was physically attracted to her. This was something I'd tried to conceal, especially from myself, but it was bursting out of me. Every time I masturbated, Anna popped into my head, and when she surfaced, her big breasts and slender waist, the little bulge just above her pussy, her heady white floral perfume, I always blocked her image out. I felt ashamed, as though it were my own mother I was fantasizing about. But on night 4 of the communication detox, as I masturbated drowsily in bed, I allowed myself to imagine being with Anna fully for the first time. I was her daughter and had menstrual cramps. Mommy Anna had cajoled me into bed with a cup of Harney and Sons tea. I lay still under the cool sheets as she spoke to me in a hushed voice, almost a whisper. "Can I rub your belly?" she asked. She was wearing a pink bathrobe, which was slightly open, and I could see the length of her abundant breasts in the dim light. "Yes," I said, "that would be nice." She really wanted to comfort me. She was just aching to soothe me. She was dying for it. I felt beautiful and treasured as she cooed and rubbed my lower abdomen over my cotton pajamas. I was wearing cotton pajamas as I touched myself in reverie. "I'm going to take this off," she said of the robe, so I can be more comfortable rubbing you. "Okay," I said. When she opened her robe, a waft of her white floral perfume came toward me like a sweet and filthy wind. There was also the smell of her pussy in the air, salty. Her breasts were gorgeous pendulums with big nipples the color of dusky valentines, ample and perfect. But that bump below her waist, just above her pussy, where the flesh had gathered in her aging, drove me the craziest. I wanted to rub against it, then work my way down to her pubic hair, unshaved and unwaxed, a thick mound of dark and coarse femininity. I could hear her breathing as she rubbed my abdomen softly. "How does that feel?" she asked. "Good," I whispered. "Good," she said. I was beginning to get the feeling she liked me as more than a daughter. I mean, she was naked, but she hadn't yet touched any parts of me that a mother wouldn't touch. "I want you to feel good," she said as she continued to tenderly stroke my tummy. She moved her body over me so that her face was by my face, her hair brushing against my cheek. She muzzled my forehead, the tip of my nose, my neck. Then she kissed me very lightly on the lips. There was a pause. Then she kissed me again, this time with her mouth open. Her tongue was in my mouth, tasting for mine like a ripe strawberry. So it was confirmed. Mommy wanted me. She was seducing me, and she didn't even seem the least bit ashamed. If she wasn't ashamed, then I wouldn't be ashamed. I was merely the seducee. I was the innocent one here. You are the innocent one here, she said. I loved being the innocent one. I heard a soft moan come out of my mouth, filling hers. Gently, she lifted up my shirt and moved her lips to my nipples. I felt like I was made of liquid, viscous, throbbing with ache. I continued to rub myself frantically, imagining what would come next. I replayed that first tongue kiss again and again. Then she let her tits dangle over my face, and I suckled on each one, thinking, feed me, Mommy, so that I may live. My real mother had not breastfed me. She said I hurt her nipples too much. I knew that if Anna were my mother, she would have breastfed me as a little baby, and now she was doing it again. I sucked as much as I could of her nipple into my mouth. I wanted to choke on her, to be filled up entirely with her breast, all the way down my throat. I made little squelching noises as I sucked. Her legs straddled my thigh. Then she began to ride me. Her thigh moved against my pussy in a circular motion. Her pubic hair was thick and wiry. I could feel her wetness, how much she wanted me. She was doing everything. I only had to lie there and be myself. Every time I got close to coming, I would stop masturbating and let the wave of my pleasure simmer back down. I want you to eat me, as I thought as I edged closer. The consuming mother, I thought as I pulled away. I want you to eat me, closer, closer. The consuming mother, further, further. Then I got so close that I could not pull myself back from the edge. I spilled over, dissolving into pure light. When the wave of pleasure receded, Mommy Anna had disappeared. In her place was office manager Anna. She was seated in a Staples or ergonomic chair, headset on, eating a shrimp Caesar from Simply Salad. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa Broder. If that doesn't pique people's interest in buying Milk Fed, they're not awake. They're not alive. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, everyone. Melissa, you queen. Congratulations. I went through a period of insomnia, and I kept turning to Girlhood when I couldn't fall asleep. And then it had the very opposite of the intended effect, because I couldn't put it down and couldn't stop reading it, and therefore couldn't fall back asleep. It's brilliant. Everybody read it. Everybody buy it for yourself, for your friends. So I'm going to read from my book, Between Two Kingdoms, which truly would not exist if it hadn't been for Melissa's moral support and guidance and brilliant edits. All right. Also, I should note it's about a friend of mine named Melissa, who is not Melissa Febos, different Melissa. To the police officer, we must have looked like two more tough girls with terrible attitudes. We were decked out in matching black leather jackets. I was sporting a fresh buzz cut and heavy eyeliner, and a large tattoo of a python glistened on my neck. Melissa's hair spilled to her waist. A dozen silver rings adorned her fingers, and her pupils were dilated from the pot she smoked almost hourly these days. And someone just asked, is it Melissa? No, different Melissa. What the police officer couldn't have known was that my neck tattoo was fake, that M was wearing a wig, and that she had recently learned that her Ewing sarcoma was terminal. Earlier that week, the doctors had told her there was nothing more they could do for her. She had started exploring clinical options, shopping for time, but the prognosis was grim. To cheer her up, I'd proposed a night out on the town. So we'd made our way to a motorcycle and tattoo festival, then danced on our chairs under the sparkling lights of a disco ball at a drag burlesque show. And now we were here, standing face to face with a cop on a subway platform in Coney Island, the first hints of dawn seeping into the night. A few minutes earlier, we jumped the turnstile, even though both of us had Metro cards in our wallets. When facing death, the phrase YOLO, you only live once, takes on new meaning. But we had broken the law, the police officer said, and he threatened to haul us down to the local precinct. Without missing a beat, Melissa pulled off her wig, revealing her bald scalp. Her eyes glossed over with tears as she launched into an impressive fib about being in a rush to get home so that she could take her cancer meds. Her performance worked, and the cop let us off easy, issuing us $200 tickets. He even apologized for having to give us tickets at all, but said that since we'd been caught on camera, he didn't have a choice. Partners in crime, Melissa said to me under her breath after the cop wished us well and sent us on our way. Bad to the bone, literally diseased, I quipped back. The second we got on the subway and the doors closed behind us, we fell over each other, shrieking with laughter. It was the last good night we'd have together, but we didn't know it. One rarely does. 8 weeks later, on a Monday morning in early March, I went to Sloan Kettering for my second to last cycle of chemo. But instead of feeling relief that I was almost done, my thoughts kept turning to Melissa. Her cancer was spreading through her body with terrifying speed, and the tumors were ruthless. They had fractured her spine in 2 places and were pushing through her skull, distorting her delicate features and swelling one of her eyes shut. Melissa said she felt ugly and didn't want anyone to see her. With the exception of me, Max, and a few of her closest friends, she refused all visitors. When people imagine dying, they seem to gravitate towards certain stories. In eulogies and obituaries, they invoke phrases like passed away, being called home, or gained her angel wings. These euphemisms make death sound so passive and peaceful, like drifting off into a midday nap. They prefer to think that when the time comes, a person seems somehow prepared. This was not the case with Melissa. She raged as death grew more imminent. I'm not ready, she'd say. I still have so much to do. She was also terrified, obsessing over what it would be like and how her parents would cope. Every day that week, after I finished up my infusion, I rode the elevator to the 18th floor where she was an inpatient. Each time I showed up, she seemed sicker and sicker. One day, before entering her room, I saw her parents in the hallway. The doctors keep telling us to prepare ourselves. We need to prepare ourselves, her father said, rubbing his puffy eyes with balled fists as if trying to wake from a nightmare. When I went to see Melissa another day, she asked me if I wanted to go on a trip with her to India. She thought we should leave right away. I don't have much time, she slurred, her voice soaked with morphine. I sat quietly for a moment, searching for the right words to respond. Over the last few years, I'd watched my friends and family force upbeat smiles and blink back tears as they sat by my own hospital bed. Now, as I struggled to do the same, I stared up at the ceiling and swallowed hard, then bit my bottom lip as I tried to keep my composure. Where should we travel to first? I asked. Death never comes at a good time. But getting a death sentence when you're young is a breach of contract with the natural order of things. After years of being sick, Melissa and I had learned to coexist with the threat of death as best we could. Mortality was a stench we couldn't wash off, no matter how hard we tried. We talked about it at length. Sometimes we even joked about it. Melissa said she wanted everyone to cry a lot at her funeral. I said I wanted mine to have a raucous after party, and together we drew up a rider, detailing the guest list and what kind of booze would be served. But nothing could have prepared me for actually losing her. The sheer number of times we had flirted with death and then recovered had, in a strange way, made us feel invincible. Even after Melissa left New York, even after she stopped answering text messages, her mind traveling to the watery space between the living and that other place, even after her parents wrote to say that in her final hours she was surrounded by family and dozens of doodads and trinkets, it didn't compute. It still doesn't compute. The friend I could unapologetically talk to about everything was gone. But gone where? And why? Grief is a ghost that visits without warning. It comes in the night and rips you from your sleep. It fills your chest with shards of glass. It interrupts you mid-laugh when you're at a party, chastising you that just for a moment you've forgotten. It haunts you until it becomes a part of you, shadowing you breath for breath. Thank you, and congratulations, Melissa.
Our next reader is the one and only Donika Kelly, who is the author of Bestiary, which y'all know very well. It has been all over the place and won many, many awards. And the forthcoming, available for pre-order now, The Renunciations. So please welcome Donika, and I'm gonna bring her up now. Let's see.
Hey, y'all. That's right, Matt King, Juice, and Febos. Y'all, I'm so excited to be here and to celebrate Melissa's book. I had the pleasure and privilege of listening to her hammer away at it in her office. We are, in fact, sitting in two different rooms in the same house. But it's been so instructive. And for me as a writer, to watch Melissa work, to get to read early drafts, it just feels like such a gift. And y'all get this book. It is excellent. So I'm going to read some poems about my girlhood, which was, like I imagine most people's, fraught. So I'm going to read 4 poems. And the first one is titled Fourth Grade Autobiography. And I think the only thing that you need to know is that I was a kid during the LA uprisings in the early 90s, after the police officers who beat Rodney King were acquitted. So, 4th grade autobiography. We live in Los Angeles, California. We have a front yard and a backyard. My favorite things are cartwheels, salted plums, and playing catch with my dad. I squeeze the grass and dirt between my fingers, eat my tongue white. He launches every ball into orbit. Every ball drops like an anvil, heavy and straight into my hands. I am afraid of riots and falling and the dark, the sunset of flames ringing our block, groceries and Asian-owned storefronts. No one to catch me. Midnight walks from his room to mine. I believe in the devil. I have a sister and a brother and a strong headlock. We have a dog named Spunky, fawn and black. We have an olive tree, a black walnut tree, a fig tree. We lie in the grass and wonder who writes in the sky. I lie in the grass and imagine my name, a cloud, drifting. Saturday dance parties, everyone drunk on pink panties, screwdrivers and Canadian Club, dominoes and spades, Al Green and Mac 10. Sometimes Mama dances with the dog. Sometimes my dad dances with me. I am careful not to touch. He is careful to smile with his whole face. So I did a little check to make sure that Melissa's mom was not in the audience. And since she's not, I'm going to read this poem titled Unsupervised at 11:12. It's not in anything, but I did say to Melissa Febos that I would read this poem. Unsupervised at 11:12. When they left me unsupervised, my parents, I wandered the house, an archaeologist. The dig site, their room. The technology, ancient to me now. The tape deck, zigzags and loose bud in the wooden box. The video cassette, its white label and 3 X's that I slipped into the VCR. I must have known something about pornography then. Something about the wild thing or grinding, what we played at in the dark. On the screen, a tanned man on tiptoe behind the blonde woman crouched like a sad cat on the medical table, the sound surprised from her throat like a cough at each stroke. Did I masturbate? Of course. And in my parents' bed, careful after to rewind the tape to where they or he had left it. Though now I know no one keeps track of when they stopped the tape. That's a funny one to like come across in just like in the file folder. So 2 more. Thank you, sweetie. Hermit Thrush is a poem. We moved to Arkansas when I was 12 or 13. Sorry, when I was 13 or 14. And I had never been around so many white people in my life because I lived in Southern California. I lived in South Central, and I'd maybe seen like 6 white people in real life. And then we were suddenly in Arkansas, and it was a very different scenario. And that changed my relationship to my body a little bit. So this is titled Hermit Thrush. We never knew winter before this. Winter where none of the trees lose their needles, where ice creaks the limb, and the hermit thrush forages for insects on the forest floor. Winter where, finally, the white girls, after a long summer of bronze and muscle and shine, cover their legs. Winter where we can finally feel beautiful too. We say we, I mean I. When they cover their legs, I can feel beautiful too. And then the last poem that I'll read is from the new book, from the Renunciations. So I'm just going back to California, fraught relationship there as well. So thank y'all for your attention. Sanctuary. The tide pool crumples like a woman into the smallest version of herself, bleeding onto whatever touches her. The ocean, I mean, not a woman, filled with plastic lace, and closer to the vanishing point, something brown breaks the surface. Human, maybe, a hand or foot or an island of trash. But no, it's just a garden of kelp, a wild life. This is a prayer like the sea urchin is a prayer, like the sea star is a prayer, like the otter and cucumber, as if I know what prayer means. I call this the difficulty of the non-believer, of waking every morning without a God. How to understand then what deserves rescue and what deserves to suffer? Who? Or should I say, what must be sheltered and what abandoned? Who? I might ask you to imagine a girl no older than 10, but also no younger, on a field trip to a rescue. She is led to the gates that separate the wounded sea lions from their home and the class. How the girl wishes this measure of salvation for herself, to claim her own barking voice, to revel in her own scent and sleek brown body, her fingers woven into the cyclone fence. Thank y'all so much. Get Melissa's book.
Thank you so much. That's beautiful. Okay, we're going to try again. We think we got it this time. Everybody, hold your breath for Bassey Ikpi. We got it. We got it. It's going to happen. Yes! Woohoo!
Whew.
Welcome.
Thank you. Am I on? Do I start now?
You're on. You're here. It's your stage.
Okay. Thank you for being patient. I had a bunch of ad blockers and things. That's what I get for trying to watch YouTube without giving people ad money. But I'm very happy to be here. I stated earlier that I've been quiet since October online. And the only thing that would get me out would be Melissa, because my book would not exist without Melissa, without Melissa's book. Because when I read Abandon Me, it changed my relationship with memoir. It changed the way that I approached mine. I literally threw everything that I was writing before. I didn't throw it away. I threw it in a folder. And then I started again with more permission to be honest about the way that I spoke about myself and my story. But then beyond that, Melissa was gracious enough to meet this stranger in a coffee shop in Brooklyn the day she was flying somewhere to have coffee with me and talk to me about what it means to write a memoir that is honest and raw, and what it means to be confident and secure in your truth. And it just gave me all the permission I need to do what I needed to do. So I share any credit that I have for this book with who Melissa is and what she taught me and what she continues to teach me. Again, I've been quiet online since October, but Girlhood, I haven't written anything in a year, and Girlhood, I still didn't write anything, but Girlhood made me want to write and makes me feel like if I ever wanted to, the words are still there for me. So thank you. blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to take a lot of time, but I'm going to be reading part of an essay from my book, I'm Telling the Truth, But I'm Lying, entitled Young Girls, They Do Get Weary. I'm going to start somewhere in the middle, but essentially it is about when the Challenger exploded when I was in elementary school. And that is the moment that my relationship with like anxiety and my mental health kind of switched over. So here we go. As the shuttle climbed higher and higher, I could feel my body begin to surge. The room got hot and I got lightheaded. I recognized the surge. It was the whirlwind that overcame me on nights I couldn't sleep. It was me, wild-eyed and energetic, a monster on the playground, smashing the tetherball around the pole, narrowly missing my opponent's head. It was me in class, knowing that I had to sit still, be still. Those were the rules, but feeling like something was running around inside of me so quickly that I could almost feel my blood squirting through my veins until I couldn't take it anymore. And I would ask to be excused to the bathroom and would run as fast as I could there and back twice. It was like that, only multiplied 100 times and more uncomfortable. This was almost painful. It felt like my blood was rushing around looking for an exit. I had to shut out the buzzing around me. I closed my eyes, lowered my head, and did my own backwards count to 10, trying to settle my quaking body. When I looked up again, the shuttle was still steady and climbing further and further into the blue of sky. I closed my eyes again, nothing more than a blink. What came next was something I still struggled to make sense of. I can still see the fireball explosion and the puff of smoke, lumpy like a cancerous cloud, like a misshapen two-headed serpent. There was quiet in our classroom, in the school, in the world, for what felt like an eternity. But it must have only been a moment, because suddenly the first child found a gasp, and that gasp gave way to sobs that still echo in my ears. Everyone was crying, some with tears running down their face silently, others wailing and weeping. It wasn't until I noticed that my hands, balled in tight fists on my desk, were soaked that I realized that I was crying. I don't know if I wailed. I do know that my face was wet and my new glasses held a river, but I think I was silent. I looked over at my teacher, her face white as the smoke and clouds, slumped dead-eyed against the edge of her desk. I remember fearing that she would faint. I remember wondering if I could lift her. I was too stunned to think of anything else. On air, Tom Brokaw was struggling to make sense of the thing we had just witnessed. He struggled, his voice heavy with grief and confusion. Then there was a pause, and his familiar face fell for a split second before he offered the news he had just learned. Ladies and gentlemen, there are no survivors. There are no survivors. There are no survivors. That lived like an echo in my head long after he said it. The teacher pulled herself together enough in time to turn off the TV so we wouldn't see the wreckage, but it was too late for me. I was already imagining the mangled mess of metal spread on the ground, the pieces of flesh and limbs littered across Florida. I wondered if those who came to watch were sprayed with debris and blood. The quaking in my body returned. I can't imagine we just returned to math and reading groups. I can't imagine us just rolling into the blacktop for tetherball and soccer at recess. At some point, we went home. At some point, we stopped discussing it. At some point, our lives continued. My life was forever changed. Tom Brokaw's "There were no survivors" lived in my chest. I didn't understand who got to choose who survives and who dies. God, I guess, but what was his criteria? Maybe if I hadn't blinked at that exact moment, maybe if I hadn't turned my head, or if I had been better at sitting still, those people, that teacher, wouldn't be dead. Those families wouldn't be in such pain. If I hadn't looked away, if I hadn't been so concerned about my own discomfort and taken my eyes off those 7 people, if I hadn't upset mommy or disappointed daddy, if I had studied harder for this math test, if I had run faster, if I had tried harder, if I was better, there would have been survivors. The explosion had triggered something I wouldn't have the language to identify for more than a decade. At home, I stayed in my room thinking about famine, war, the homeless, and the sick, listing all the ways I could have prevented the Challenger explosion. At school, I sat in a corner of the playground, my back against the chain link fence, watching the other kids play. I wanted to join them. I wanted to be out there with them, but I couldn't do it. My brain was too heavy. I started getting headaches. They would begin at one part of my head, then zoom to another. The pain was unbearable and my whole body would wince, but it was also so brief and sudden that I was never sure that I hadn't just imagined them. My head was sensitive to touch. They would come out of nowhere and then leave just as quickly. When the headaches became more frequent and painful, I decided to tell my parents, even though I wasn't sure if they would believe me. I didn't know how to explain the pain and how it connected to the quiet that suddenly followed me. I waited until we were in the car. I told them I wasn't the only one who had had them in hopes that this would arouse their concern and not a dismissal or a litany of questions I couldn't answer. Instead, they asked me if I had been doing drugs with my friends. Confused and stuttering, I replied that I didn't even know where to get drugs, which only led them to believe I had been considering it. I hoped the pain would come so they could at least see what it looked like, how I flinched and cringed with each pop in my skull. I tried to back out of the whole thing and find a way to ignore the comet of pain ricocheting around my head. No, it's not my whole head. No, it's not a pounding. It's like an explosion, like a cancerous fireball, like a two-headed serpent, like an explosion, like there will be no survivors. You said your friends have the same problem. No, yes, no. Which one? I could feel the tension build in my shoulders. I began to shake. I shrunk into myself and allowed quiet to take over. I shook my head, no. I shook my head, no. I shook my head, no. I pressed my head against the window and let their voices hit me, flinching ever so slightly as the pain snuck in and sent off bundles of agony in my head. I never mentioned the headaches again. Months later in math class, I finished a test early. Normally, I would ask for a bathroom pass so I could sprint down hallways and corridors to get out some of my pent-up energy, but instead, I turned my test over and began writing on the blank page. I wrote a list of all the disasters, personal and global, that were my fault. I filled the entire page with the guilt I carried. I wrote of the sadness that filled my days and nights. I wrote about how much it hurt just to be. I was called to the principal's office later that week and walked in to find my parents seated inside, looking small and anxious. I immediately felt guilty for the worry I was causing, the hours they couldn't afford to take off work. My head began to throb. I shrunk inside myself and swallowed the truth. I told them it was a poem, something I was doing for extra credit. They didn't believe me, but I wouldn't give them anything else. The rocket of pain was already exploding in my head. I couldn't be responsible for creating new worries. I was the oldest. It was my responsibility to be easy. I couldn't tell them anything else. I was told not to write all my tests anymore. I agreed and vowed to myself to keep the chaos I carried to myself. The end. Bye, Girlhood. Thank you so much for being patient. And Melissa, I love you so much. I wish I could tell you every minute, every day. You are just a treasure and a gift to this world, and I'm so grateful that you're here. Thank you.
Thank you, Bassey. Next, we're going to bring up Grace Lavery. Grace has a special treat for us.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, thank you. Well, Melissa, thank you so much for inviting me to come and speak with your wonderful readers and fans and friends today. I'm proud to count myself among them. I love you so much, Melissa. Girlhood is an incredible achievement. I hope you're very proud, and it's a real honor to be here just cheering you on. Okay, I have a PowerPoint, so that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to assume that you can see that. I'm just going to have to assume it. I've got two readings. The first is slightly longer than the second, but they're both fairly short. The second one is happier than the first. And I just want to say a word of solidarity and love to anyone who is in the state of Arkansas and is feeling that their girlhood is in some way under threat. My first piece is called Sorted. Place the bag upon your head, child, and you shall know which is the way you must go, and we shall raise you in the way you must go. So the bag was placed upon his head, though he wasn't a child any longer. The Scottish woman enunciated her words carefully, as though pronouncing a death sentence, the secret of a smile flickering at the corners of her mouth. The policy had initially been developed to help identify workplace bullies early on, with the goal of keeping them as comfortable as possible. But the idea had, if anything, been too successful, and now the bag could be placed on anyone, everyone, at any point, for any taxonomic purpose one wished. It was well known that there were 4 paths out of there, escape routes, if you like, though only a minority of those onto whom the bag was placed knew more than a bare minimum. There was a rumor, and wasn't it true, that the first of these paths was the straightest, a path of leonine strength. Those who took it were life's winners. When one is dealing with a sociopath, one keeps things steady. The man forever trying to bite his own nose off, lips stretching and jaw clenching as he sucks his face in through the hard palate. The lion man is a vacuum in the mouth. The corresponding flavor is salt. Lion woman, though cruel in her own way, had bent herself into a brittle, fuckable sneer. Of the pair, she resembled a lion the more. She shook her mane fiercely, and she told lovers that she loved fiercely, although it was not love. There was a third, a lion runt, a lion grunt, a lion gimp, who proved the rest. Onto him they pushed themselves. Into his mouth they spat the cruelest jokes, the meanest and the sharpest words. Cunt, they called him, you stupid cunt, even in front of his mother, who laughed along because she preferred his brothers. Later they said of the runt, he truly was the bravest one of all, which was true by default. The idea being, you keep everything cozy until you can get close enough to put one right between the eyes. The second path solicited the soft ones, the marshmallow boys and the simple plain girls with their loopy handwriting. These gentle creatures were used to test vaccines, and their arms were needle-freckled, every now and then a blotch where some spike or other made pollution. Flowers of clotted blood clung on under the epidermis. These soft ones lived pacified lives, speaking perhaps in rhyme, perhaps in childish, vacant alliteration. My parsley petals primp up fat, one such used to say, a reference to his bulbous, itching hemorrhoids. And they loved onomatopoeia. They named themselves such: Mungo Flopsy, Petit Four Puggleton, Weebling Wally. And they walked by sloping. They sloped through the woods towards the logging plant, heavy-shouldered. When they had to be moved, it was nighttime. You could not move the soft ones by day. Too lobotomized, too druggy, spherical, they rolled. For each path had its inverse. Nothing was accomplished by accident in the school of the pig scar. Very little was accomplished at all. And such was the state of permanent embattlement, and that was by design, since despite the rather puckish title of school, it had acquired from one of the elderly commanders, a roughly sentimental old fellow whose peccadilloes were neither more nor less than one would expect. It was clear that there was no longer a pretense at an educational mission. What was the mission? Someone sometimes wondered, and the wise Scottish woman replied, sorting. It is a vague word, perhaps, but nonetheless she meant something quite specific by it. The school existed to separate, group, taxonomize, and hierarchize every soul ever clasped in flesh. That, she concedes, is a rather ambitious goal for a single institution, and yet it could be achieved with patience. One does not choose, after all, whose body shall pass under one's roof, pass through one's metal detector, or shred flesh on one's razor-tipped barbed wire, but one certainly can choose how to dispense with them. When she had reached this part of the spiel, the Scottish woman would sprinkle one of her trademark half smiles onto her lips. Indeed, how can one do anything but choose? This all being so, the third path was that known as sky burial. It was reserved for the beaks, the peckers, the sharp-clawed ones, not the rascals. Rascals were usually sent to placating, but the intellectuals, if you like, the dreamers, the black wearers, as well as, bit of an odd one, the sluts. This was the path of secrecy, the path of excavation, and those who were set upon it could carved in one place only. Can you guess? Yes, it was carved in the solar plexus, in the center of the body. Tiny little X marks, little crosses, one each Monday morning to mark the work ahead. Their bellies grew mottled and tight through the astringent property of scar tissue. When it was time to terminate one, it would be by the careful removal of the scar plug and the gradual draining of the arteries. The Scottish woman, who admired so much about each of her charges, though they each caused her trouble too, did not care for the sharp ones and rarely attended to them personally, preferring to dispatch after them the quick gentleman, or old Blobface as he was known. The fourth path was misnamed, for in truth there was no path, merely a stile and a large gaping hole in the universe where the money used to be, choking and choking and choking on the money hole, spluttering and squirting one's everything into the hole. Those sent on the fourth way were quickly driven to despair and sexual mania by the stickiness of it all, the adhesion, the glue of body and body. They were forced to drink bleach, small quantities of bleach, or to snort little crystals of bleach up their cocaine-hungry little noses, sharp as you like. I don't even believe they ended the bleach team. I still believe they are out there, howling and sticking their dicks into the black hole of the void, electrical sockets, books that will chap them with paper cuts by the dozen. For the Scottish woman, there was no pleasure in this, only the truth. We are all, are we not, different from each other, and wouldn't we be happiest to be among our own kind? The logical force of that syllogism did not bring her joy, it simply persuaded her and sat in her like a rock. For the bag itself, deep joy. The bag that was plunged around the body of the sortable, that gripped and clenched with hard membrane and soft, and that knew as soon as the plunging had begun what sorting awaited. For the bag, sorting was like birthing. Once you enter me, it seemed to say, I know your future and your past, and there was nothing to apologize for. Some are meant for greatness, and others are meant to serve as pus bags in drug trials. Each has and all have been pushed out of a pussy and cast in a bag, each shrouded in liquor and squeezed until every chromosome has been read and accounted for. For the bag, pulling was the same as pushing. Fucking was the same as eating. Killing was the same as curing. Motherhood was the same as crime. And truly, it really was like 1984. Change of pace, second one's much shorter. Laura Dern loves to watch machines washing her car. I am the car wash. I stand in the background washing Laura Dern's car. She knew as I started that it would excite her when I did. She was nonetheless surprised by the degree to which she was moved. Laura Dern looks at me as I begin the slow, thorough work of washing her car. She is proud and stirred. She feels a string section. I feel like the brass, quacking awkwardly and rumbling away, but playing my part for all that. As I move my tendrils over Laura Dern's car and begin the work for which I am paid my crust, she wonders whether she could share this with you. You like her. You enjoy knowing what she's up to. You thrive under her gaze. She turns to you and starts big. Man, oh man, she sighs, though I am neither and nor are you. Do I love a car wash? I am honored, Laura. I perform my work. You perform yours. You watch me too, woolly and shaggy like that rare large Muppet on a dolly gliding over the maroon shell of Laura Dern's car. You wonder, view at a car wash, what it might be like to hold your hand to Laura Dern's car and shake a chamois over it. Lather that beast up. Make it gentle. Laura Dern is introducing you to love. What does it mean to love as Laura Dern loves a car wash? The robins are coming back. She is getting her love back. It pours in and gushes everywhere. It swirls everywhere and in her hair and everywhere. You picture yourself standing there wet and tumbled around. Now you are the car. You are being massaged vigorously, professionally, deep tissue. I hold you and you feel the tumble. Nothing about this cloys. This is wet vigor. Now you are the car. Now you are under the gaze of Laura Dern and the version of yourself that you have left behind to pick up later. The ghost where you used to be that watches you as you move through me. A thought flies in, so absolutely clear and improbable that it produces only embarrassment. Could this be, in fact, the very car wash where a young Laura Dern held the hand of her own grandmother and stirred in girlish anticipation as I rumbled over and above and from the sides and both regular and irregular in my rhythm? Now, astonished, Laura Dern's grandmother is here, a ghost, played by Grace Zabriskie, who is me. I am also named Grace, the car wash. Now we are all together. Now we are one. Can we look at the car wash? Let us look at it. Let us look. That's all I've got. Thank you, Melissa, for inviting me.
Thank you. Everybody now wants to know when they can get your book, Grace. It is coming out from Seal Press in 2022. So be on the lookout. Charis will most certainly be advertising it widely. So do not fret. We will make sure you know about it. It's just doesn't quite have a link yet. So keep an eye out. We're thrilled that this book is coming to fruition. That was such a fun ride. So our next reader is Alex Marzano-Lesnevich. They are the author of The Fact of a Body, A Murder and a Memoir. So welcome, Alex. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I've got to say, this lineup is incredible. It's just such a joy to hear everyone's work. And it's also such a joy to hear all the joy and love that we all have for Girlhood. Melissa, it really strikes me, sort of writes work that feels so gorgeously and intricately true that the rest of us just have no choice but to kind of try to up our game on the page and be more honest ourselves. I read the galley for Girlhood when I was working on the proposal for my next book, Both and Neither. And I just kept like pushing my pages aside, being like, oh no, I gotta try again. I gotta say the thing, and I gotta say the thing in a way that feels new, because Melissa is constantly reinventing her voice on the page, constantly making us think of words anew. So it is such an honor to be part of this group. Melissa, congratulations on this gorgeous, gorgeous stunner of a book. And all of you, I hope you have gotten your copy already, since we're pretty far into the event, but if you haven't, get it now. I am going to read from an essay that is part of the book that will be coming out. That book is called Both and Neither. It'll be out from Doubleday in 2023 or so, assuming I finish it on time. And I'm going to read from an essay called Body Language that was kind of the seed for the book that was in Best American Essays 2020. I'm 8 years old, sitting in my childhood kitchen, ready to watch one of the home videos my father has made. The videotape still exists somewhere, so somewhere she still is that girl on the screen. Hair that tangles, freckles across her nose that in time will spread across one side of her forehead. A body that can throw a baseball the way her father has shown her. A body in which bones and hormones lie in wait, ready to bloom into the wide hips her mother has given her. A body that has scars. The scars over her lungs and heart from the scalpel that saved her when she was a baby. The invisible scars left by a man who touched her when she was young. A body is a record, or a body is freedom, or a body is a battleground. Already at 8, she knows it to be all three. But somebody has slipped. The school is putting on the musical South Pacific, and there are not enough roles for the girls, and she is as tall or taller than the boys, and so they have done what is unthinkable in this thriving 1980s town. In this place where the men do the driving and the women make their mouths into perfect O's to apply lipstick in the rear view. For the musical, they have made her a boy. No, she thinks, they have allowed her to be a boy. What I remember is the flush I feel as my father loads the tape into the player. Usually I hate watching videos of myself. Usually there is this stranger on the screen, this girl with her pastel clothing, and I am supposed to pretend that she is me. And she is. I know she is, but also she isn't. In the 3rd grade, I'll be asked to draw a self-portrait in art class. And for years into the future, when I try to understand when this feeling began, this feeling of not having words to explain what my body is, to explain who I am, I remember my shock as I placed my drawing next to my classmates. They'd drawn stick figures with round heads and blonde curls or crew cuts. They'd drawn their families and their dogs and the bright yellow spikes of a sun. One had drawn long hair and the triangle shape of a dress, and another short hair and jeans. How had they known so easily what they looked like? I had drawn a swirl. Now in the kitchen, what I notice is that my siblings are squirming in their seats, asking if they can leave, and that I somehow am not. I am sitting perfectly still. Is it possible that I want to see this video? The feeling is peculiar. I have not yet known the pleasure of taking something intimately mine and watching the world respond. Someday I will be a writer. Someday I will love this feeling. But at 8 years old, my private world both pains and sustains me, and sharing it is new. My mother hushes my siblings and passes popcorn around the table. My father takes his spot at the head. On screen, the auditorium of an elementary school appears. At the corner of the stage, there are painted plywood palm trees. And then the curtains part, and there I am. My hair slicked back, my ponytail pinned away, a white sailor's cap perched on my head. Without the hair, my face looks different, angular, fine-boned. I'm wearing a white plain t-shirt tucked into blue jeans, all the frill and fluff of my normal clothing stripped away. And with it, somehow, so much else. All my life, I have felt ungainly, wrong-sized, wrong-shaped. But look, on the screen, there is only ease. I don't know whether the hush I remember spread through the kitchen or only through me. My mother is the first to speak. "You make a good-looking boy," she says. I feel the words I'm not brave enough to say. I know. Soon after, I began to ignore the long hair that marked me so firmly as a girl, leaving it in the same ponytail for days on end until it knotted into a solid dark mass. All my friends were boys, and my dearest hours were spent playing Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on the lawn with my twin brother and the neighbor boy. My room was blue, and my teddy bear was blue, And the turtle I wanted to be was Leonardo, not only because he was smart, but because his color was blue. When my twin brother got something I didn't, to go to the baseball game, though we were all fans, to camp with the Boy Scouts while my sisters and I were shuttled off to the ballet, to keep the porn mags I discovered in his bedroom. And the reason given was that he was a boy, rage took me with tears. That was grief, I think now, the grief of being misunderstood. One afternoon, when my brother yet again went shirtless for a game of catch and I wasn't allowed to, I announced to my father that I didn't want to be a girl, not if being a girl meant I had to wear a shirt. My father went to get my mother. They whispered together, and then my mother explained that I should be happy to be a girl. There were so many good things about it. I knew there were. That wasn't the problem. The problem was that people kept calling me one. I remember realizing that I could not explain this to her. Back then, in 1985, the word genderqueer, how I now identify, the language that would eventually help me see myself, hadn't yet been invented. The term wouldn't come into existence for another decade, nor would non-binary, which first appeared in an online forum. Quote, do you ever really feel as if you've moved from that non-binary existence as a transsexual into a real man or woman? So note the way that non-binary was positioned from its inception as transitory, as a passing through. It could not itself be a destination, the end to a story. As the scholar Jay Prosser has written, quote, transsexuality is always narrative work, a transformation of the body that requires the remolding of the life into a particular narrative shape. It is the narrative constructed in retrospect, then, perhaps even more than the body, that makes the self recognizable, even cognizable. But narrative requires language. And what word was there for me then that would have conveyed the wrongness of everything? So I said nothing. In middle school, I looked up and realized that everyone had chosen sides. The girls suddenly wore makeup and sparkles. The boys no longer played with them. Not choosing sides meant everyone could see that you were other. And by then, I already felt so other, I couldn't bear it. And so the years of frosted pink and purple eyeshadow began, and the earrings I bought in packs at Kmart, my favorite, a pair of tiny turquoise dangling airplanes. In girl or boy, I'm neither form. I have always been a fan of excess. At 18, I admitted to myself that it was the girls who caught my eye, not the boys. Terrified, I kept this too a secret and kept dating boys until at 28, I met a woman who pursued me. In her, I chose, as I would keep choosing, the sort of woman who made me feel safe. They wore long earrings like I did. Sometimes we traded glitter eyeshadow. And when we went to bars together, we were at once highly visible and utterly invisible. Men asked if we were sisters. They bought us drinks. And all of this felt like fakery even as I lived it, my life arranged into a role like all those plays I did throughout high school. To live that way, to make your life suit a prearranged story, a gender, was possible. Until abruptly it wasn't. I was in graduate school when this changed, dating a woman who identified as butch and looked so much like a boy that the first time I went to meet her at a bar, I walked right by her on the street. When I stood with her, I was always read as the feminine one. I was always safe. Nobody knew my secret. I told my graduate school that I was taking a leave of absence, moving to New Orleans to research a murder I would eventually write a book about. I told no one that this was a lie, that I already had the research I needed. I moved instead to figure out something I could not articulate even to myself, but that on some quiet level I had been wondering about since I was 8. My body did not feel like mine. My life did not feel like mine. Was there a self that wouldn't feel like a costume? Thanks, everybody, and congrats again, Melissa.
That was beautiful. Thank you so much. Elissa is the author of My Body is a Book of Rules, and her forthcoming book, White Magic, is available for pre-order now. So welcome, Elissa.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. Oh my gosh, this has been super super amazing. So excited to celebrate Melissa and Girlhood. I love this book. I love this person. Melissa is one of the most generous people on this whole earth, and is just, she works so hard. She shows up so much for her writing and her friends and herself, and is truly my role model. I'm going to read a little bit from White Magic, a book that I don't think it would exist without Melissa, because the major changes in my life that the book concerns are ones that she helped me make when I needed to make them. She's always been there for me. I'm going to read 2 sections from an essay called The Spirit Corridor. The essay is made of sections that are labeled with kinds of doors. Crying room door. I liked church because of the mysteries. Joyful, sorrowful, glorious. I liked that my dad called one of God's 3 persons the Holy Ghost, like a character in a book of scary stories. In Catholic school, I learned that some supernatural truths could not be accessed through human reason. I took this to mean that God kept secrets like I did. My secrets were that I wanted to kiss the Ninja Turtles. I had a twin brother nobody could see, and I peed in the closet. God's secrets were about other worlds. In the New Testament, though, mysterion doesn't mean mystery, something impossible or difficult to understand. It refers to what is mystical, with a spiritual meaning inaccessible without initiation. The priests said we could never understand how God impregnated Mary, how Jesus rose from the dead, or how Mary was pulled to heaven. But I was instructed in assumption before gravity, resurrection before biological death, and immaculate conception before reproduction. The problem with mystery is that I have always understood completely. I never fully cultivated a sense of reason in which what's called supernatural would be anything but natural. The church was dark, built from wood beams and black pillars. Off to the side, in the crying room, there was a statue of the Virgin. I wanted to be secreted inside with her. I cried through masses, hoping Mom would take Nate and me to that hiding place so I could watch the porcelain woman in case she might weep with me. Doors at the bottom of the rabbit hole. My Catholic picture books made me think heaven was a town built on a layer of stratocumulus clouds, which disappointed me because I wanted a heaven like the garden on the other side of the door in Alice's Wonderland. I considered myself the true owner of the library's copy of Disney's Alice in Wonderland, nesting in its puffy white VHS case until I could bring it home again. I studied Alice as she crept through the black woods and sat in disoriented defeat among the mome raths. I watched her shrink and grow. I was looking for the garden too. Our lawn violets never spoke. There had to be a door somewhere, but I couldn't even find a rabbit hole to fall down. In the woods, I turned over rocks, looking for the underworld, always fearing I'd find a nest of snakes instead. Once I could read, I worked through the book enough times to memorize parts. Maybe my woods were already Wonderland. Maybe my cat would dissolve into a hanging grin. At school, when boys played games that ended with the loser having to kiss me without my invitation, I understood I was stuck somewhere, like Alice. There were doors all around the hall, but they were all locked, and when Alice had been all the way down one side and up the other, trying every door, she walked sadly down the middle, wondering how she was ever to get out again. In the Disney adaptation, Alice faces only one door. It is locked and has a talking face. You did give me quite a turn, the door puns, and makes sure we get the joke. Rather good, what? Doorknob, Turn? Alice peers through the keyhole mouth at the garden. In my recollection of the movie, the viewer sees what she sees. I can picture it. Fountains, hedges, rose bushes, topiaries. But I imagined the image. Alice doesn't look through the door portal until the film is nearly over. She's been crying in the woods, singing to the creatures gathered to gawk at her pain, singing to herself, "It would be so nice if something would make sense for a change." When the Cheshire Cat, a puff of purple around a crescent moon of teeth, tells her there's a way out. He makes a door appear in a tree trunk. Alice steps in to meet the tyrant queen in her garden. I should have seen this as a cautionary tale. The girl thinks she's looking for something that makes sense, but the deeper she pushes, the closer she gets to the seat of senseless violence in the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elissa. Everybody pre-order White Magic and check out Elissa's previous books as well. So now we're going to bring up Melissa, the person of the hour, and have you read a little bit.
Thank you, ER. What an amazing reading. Was that not amazing, everyone? I feel so satisfied with myself for having brought all of these people to you tonight, because that was like the best reading I've been to all year. Really amazing. Buy all their books. I will also say that this book review came out today in the New York Times of my book, which I'm so incredibly grateful for. And the reviewer miraculously managed to describe both me and Donika masturbating in the review, which seemed really special to me. And as I was listening to these readings, I at one point I turned to Donika and I was like, there are so many amazing masturbation scenes happening tonight. And she said, there's a lot of masturbation in your work. And I was like, is it my thing? Anyway, food for thought for later. I'm actually going to read some excerpts. Can you hear her? I'm going to read some excerpts from an essay that has no masturbation, at least in the excerpts I'm going to read to you. And I want to show you this illustration in here because it's incredibly beautiful. And you can also purchase it on my friend and collaborator Forsyth Harmon's website. Maybe somebody can drop a link to that in the chat, Forsyth or ER. But she did these incredible illustrations for the book and turned it into an illuminated manuscript. And I'm just in love with them. So I'm really grateful to her. And I'm so grateful to everyone who read and to the bookstore and ER. And really, really more than anything else to my mom, who I dedicated this book to, and I'm going to dedicate this reading to also. So this is for my mom, and this is for all the moms in the audience tonight. My birthday falls during Paenepsion, the 4th month of the ancient Greek calendar. It is the month of Persephone's abduction, the month Demeter's despair laid all the earth to waste, and during which the women of Athens celebrated Thesmophoria, a fertility festival that lasted 3 days, each with its own title, Kathodos, Nistia, and Kalagenia. The rites of the Thesmophoria were kept secret from men and included the burying of sacrifices and the retrieval of the previous year's oblations, often the bodies of slain pigs whose remains were offered on altars to the goddesses and then scattered in the fields with the year's seeds. If it weren't a pandemic, I would have invited all of you to partake in this ritual with me, but unfortunately, we're on Crowdcast. Not unfortunately, but you know. When I first got my period at 13, my mother wanted to have a party. Just small, all women, she said. I want to celebrate you. I should say that my mother is a therapist, if you don't already know. It was already too late. I seethed with something greater than the advent of my own fertility, the hormones catapulting through my body, or the end of my child form. I'd been taught by my mother to honor these changes, but there were things for which she could not prepare me. The sum of it all was unspeakable. I would rather have died than celebrate this metamorphosis with her. It is so painful to be loved sometimes, intolerable even. Psychologists and philosophers have numerous explanations for the anger that attends this cleaving between parents and children. I have read about separation and differentiation and individuation. My mother is a therapist, after all. It is a most ordinary disruption, necessarily awful, sometimes severe, especially for mothers and daughters. The closer the mother and daughter are, the more violent the daughter's effort to disentangle herself can be. I'm not looking for permission or assurance that ours was a normal break, rather a different kind of understanding. And for that, I need to retell our story. Mistia. Cape Cod, April. I was 13, and I had spent that Saturday at the library with Stacy. At least, that was what I had told my mother when I got in her car that evening. The sun was half sunk behind a cluster of storefronts. The afternoon's warmth had turned cool, a breeze from the nearby harbor carrying the soft clang of a buoy's bell. I buckled my seatbelt and waved goodbye to Stacy, who turned to walk home. My mother and I watched her stiff, straight-backed gait, the edge of her t-shirt rippling in the wind. "You smell like sex," my mother said. Her tone was of exhaustion. "Please," it said, "just tell me the truth. I know it already. Let's be in this together." It was easy to present the shock of my humiliation as incredulity. I'd done so before and we both knew it. "I've never had sex," I said. I believed this. My mother shifted into gear and turned toward the exit. "Sex isn't just intercourse," she said. We drove home in silence. I don't know if we had a conversation about trust that night. We'd had them so many times before, my mother trying to broker an understanding, to cast a single line across the distance between us. If trust was broken, my mother explained, it had to be rebuilt. But the sanctity of our trust held no currency with me, so broken trust came to mean the loss of certain freedoms. She didn't want to revoke my privileges. She wanted me to come home to her. Probably I knew this. If she didn't like the distance my lies created, then she would like even less my silence and sulks, my slammed bedroom door. Of course I won these battles. We each had something the other wanted, but I alone had conviction. It must have felt like an abduction to my mother, as if someone had stolen her daughter and replaced her with a harpy. I chose to leave her, to lie, to rush to places where people might lay their hands on me, but I was still a child. There's a chihuahua shaking behind here, if you're curious about that noise. Who then was my abductor? Can we call it Hades? The desire that filled me like smoke that chased everything else out. I was frightened, yes, but I went willingly. Perhaps that was the scariest part. When I told her just a few months short of 17 that I was moving out, she didn't try to stop me. I knew she didn't want me to go. "Maybe I should have tried to stop you," she has said to me more than once, but I was afraid I would lose you for good. Zeus insisted Hades return Persephone to her mother, and the Dark Lord capitulated on one condition. If Persephone had tasted any food of the underworld, she would be consigned to return to Hades for half of every year. Did Persephone know? Yes and no. In some versions, she thinks she is smart enough to evade him, to taste and still go home. There are so many holes in myth, so many versions and mutations, most unstamped by chronology. A myth is the memory of a story passed through time. Like any memory, it changes, sometimes by will or necessity or forgetting or even for aesthetic purpose. The pomegranate seeds were so lovely, like rubies, and so sweet. In every version of the story, Persephone tastes them. It was winter in Boston. I was 17. I didn't start with heroin. I started with meth, though we called it crystal, which sounded much prettier than the burnt clumps of tinfoil that littered our apartment and whose singed smell hung in the air as if an oven had been left on too long. Imagine Persephone's first season in hell. When I phoned home, I apologized to my mother for not calling. I've been busy with classes. I'm making such nice friends. These were half-truths. I wasn't missing classes. I did make friends. I had a job and homework and a bedroom without a door that cost me $150 per month in rent. My parents would have paid for more, but with it, they would have also bought more claim on the truth. When I rode that same Greyhound bus home and ate the meals my mother made and slept in my old room, it was like rising from some underworld to the golden light of earth. I missed it so much. I couldn't wait to leave. Imagine Persephone loving Hades. Is it impossible? She could not have escaped him by dying after all. We often love the things that abduct us. I imagine I would find a way if I were bound to someone for the rest of my life, for half of eternity. It was Christmas or Thanksgiving. My mother, brother, and I joined hands around the table, the steaming food encircled by our arms. We squeezed each other's fingers, pressed our thumbs into each other's palms. After the dishes were washed, my mother sank into the sofa and smiled at us. "Should we play a game?" she said. "I need to borrow your car," I said. I can hardly bear to remember her face. Where could you possibly have to go tonight? I don't remember what I answered, only that she let me and how much it hurt to leave them. I pulled the front door shut behind me and something tore inside, like a chapped lip that rends at a word. Still, the quickening as I lit a cigarette in the dark and turned off our road toward the highway. I didn't tell her when I got clean. She'd never known that I started. She knew what she saw, and that was bad enough. You can't crawl up to your mother from hell and not look like it. If I told her why she didn't have to worry anymore, I'd have to confirm why she'd worried. I'd have to be done for good. What if Persephone had told Demeter not only what happened in hell, but that she might be coming home for good? What daughter would do that? 3 years later, I sent her the book I'd written. "You can't call me until you've finished reading it," I said. In it were all the things I'd never told her or anyone. "Take as much time as you need," I said, hoping she'd take long enough to not need to talk to me about how it felt to know those things. She agreed. The phone rang the next morning at 7 o'clock. "I couldn't stop reading it," she said. "I kept putting it down and turning out the light and then turning it back on and picking up the book again. When I asked what she found so riveting about it, she said, 'I had to know that you were going to be all right.'" "It was the hardest thing I've ever had to read," she said. "It's wonderful." A few years ago, at a conference my mother attends every year, we stood in front of a room packed with therapists. She began the workshop by leading them through an explanation of the model she trains clinicians in around the world. She was warm and funny, expert and charismatic. You could easily see why our mailbox filled with heartfelt cards from patients she'd stopped seeing decades ago. When she was done, I stood and spoke about how writing allows me to retread the most painful parts of the past and find not only new meaning, but also healing there. That whole weekend, people clasped our hands and praised our work together. They marveled at the miracle of our collaboration. "How special," they said. "Whose idea was this?" "Hers," I said. As the memories of stories are changed with each telling, they are more irrevocably changed with each conquest, each colonizer, each assimilation of one people into another. There are older versions of Demeter's story, precursors to the Greek, that emerged from a system of matrifocal mythology and likely a society who reflected its values. In it, there was no rape, no abduction. The mother, goddess of the cycle of life and death, passed freely from underworld to earth, receiving those who died as they passed from one to the next. Her daughter, some of these older versions say, was simply the maiden version of that goddess, imbued with the same powers. Others suggest that Persephone was the very old goddess of the underworld and always had been. It used to scare me that I wanted things my mother wouldn't understand. I think we both feared our difference. In hiding it from her, I often created exactly the thing I wished to avoid. It's not that I should have told her everything. That would have been its own kind of cruelty, though I could have trusted her more. That younger version of our story, the one I've carried for most of my life, the one I've mostly told here, is also true. I hurt myself and I hurt her over and over. But like the matrifocal myth, there is another version, a wiser one. In it, Persephone is already home. Her time spent in the dark is not an aberration of nature, but its enactment. I've come to see mine the same way. My darkness has become my work on this earth. I return to my mother again and again, and both realms are my home. There is no Hades, no abductor. There is only me. There is nothing down there that I haven't found a piece of in myself. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you so much for coming tonight. This has just meant the absolute world to me. I think we can bring folks up for a little curtain call. Is that possible, ER?
Yeah, let's do it. Okay, we're going to bring folks up in groups. 1 second.
Everybody just clap.
But not me, but not Donika.
But not Donika, because she's right here next to me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Everybody clap in your little homes. I should also say I'm reading for the rest of the week with tons of other people if you want more of this. Tomorrow night I read with TK Madden, and the following night Stephanie Dandler. Hi friends. Good job jami Attenberg, Alex Marzano-Lesnevich. Grace. Elissa Washuta. Woo! Pre-order White Magic. We'll just keep clapping. Oh, I love technology. Oh, good. Thank you, everybody. Grace, let me see this whole outfit, please, before it's too late.
Leather sweatpants, bitch.
Yes, you're amazing. Thank you. Thank you.
Love you so much.
Love you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. I think that maybe everyone we can get up screen at once,
Okay,
but we incredible lineup. Thank you to everybody for being willing to hang through our tech experiment and extravaganza. This is actually the most people we've ever tried to have on camera at once. So this is excellent.
Humoring me.
No, we love it. We love everything about it. This was incredible. So please click this teal button at the bottom of your screen to buy Girlhood from Charis. As an independent feminist bookstore, it really helps us when you buy your books directly from us. Also, we're a nonprofit, so we are primarily individually donor sponsored, which means that when folks like you give $1, $3, $10 more, it really helps us put on programs like this and fund our work in other ways. So we would love for you to stay in touch. If you are somebody who lives locally, we are still closed for browsing, but we're doing some pop-ups this weekend. We'd love for you to pop by on our front porch and hang out in the sunshine with us with your mask on. And no matter where you are in the world, we invite you to join us on our very regular virtual events. We are doing like 25 events a month right now. So we're just staying very busy. We're very lucky to be in such incredible community. And this book, it is a testament to this book how many other people's truth it is inspired. So that is really, when we think about Charis books, like books that really are like our books, it's books that inspire us all to be more vulnerable in our truth. And so this book and really all of your books do that. And so we are really, really grateful to you for kicking it off in such a special way with us, and grateful to everyone in the chat. There were so many writers who are here, who were not on stage, but who are brilliant writers in the chat as well. So just thanks to everybody for being here and for all the things that you all do in the world at this hard time to make our world better. It is the thing that gives me hope on a day-to-day basis. So
me too.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, PR. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Have a great night. Congrats.